Hello everyone. Please welcome today Mr. Nilay Savla, who is an accounting professional in Canada, and he came to Canada through Express Entry PR. So people who are in India right now and who are planning to come to Canada on the Express Entry, this discussion would be very helpful for them because Mr. Nilay would be answering some of the very important questions in this interview, or you can say discussion, like what is the procedure to apply for Express Entry and what all documents are required for the same, how he got his first job in Canada very easily, what plannings he did to come here, and all sorts of questions.
So guys, please don't forget to like and subscribe our channel. Now let's begin.
Just for your introduction, I am Rashi and she's Sakshi.
By qualifications, I am all accounting and first accountant, and also have a PGDM in finance from India, and then I have done my MS in accounting from the US. I finished in 1 year, and then I worked there for 2 years. So I was in the US for roughly about 3 years. 1 year as a student and 2 years, working on H1B. Then I went to India, and then I applied for Canada PR, and then now I am here.
We would like to ask that you have shared your versatile experience with us and how you were working in India and then you were working in US and then you came here. So why did you choose Canada as your country for moving?
You keep reading about these things, all the time. So, I had a lot of friends, they were already here in Canada, and they would tell me, you have a lot of opportunities here. If you have the skills, the, talents, and if you are willing to, chase those opportunities, then definitely, there is a lot of scope that you have here, for growing professionally as well as personally. Like having seen the US, I can definitely relate with that. Because in the US as well there were a lot of opportunities, but what makes Canada better over the US is the fact that here you can come as a permanent resident, and that gives you the opportunity to kind of do several jobs if you wish to. There is no restriction in terms of which field you can do your job in. If the company finds you to be a good hire, they will definitely take you. Whereas in the US, you have H1B visa and you are at the mercy of your employer. So if you lose your job, your H1B visa is revoked. Second thing with H1B is, whatever field you studied in as a student in the US, you have to have your job in the same field, which is not the case here in Canada. So here you kind of have a lot of freedom. And you can kind of explore your talents, and you can do a lot of things. If you read about starting businesses here in Canada, the government is very supportive. You won't be stuck in unnecessary paperwork or red tapeism here. So that's a good thing. These are things from the professional perspective, but on a personal perspective as well. If you look at it, you have good air to breathe, right? No pollution, less corruption or probably no corruption. And overall quality of life is definitely way better. That's what kind of made us choose Canada.
Okay.
Okay.
If we ask about what's the notion of the express entry, and can you tell us the step-by-step procedure for our audience? What's the steps for it?
Yeah. So normally, you could immigrate here as a federal skilled worker. You could immigrate here through the Federal Skilled Trade (FST), Canadian Experience Class (CEC), and these three programs. And then you also have PNPs, Provincial Nomination Programs. But let's talk about the FSW, because that's the program I came in through. So I have knowledge only about that. So so it begins with you kind of having yourself selected in a CRS draw that happens normally. The CIC, they conduct the CRS draws every other Wednesday. That's what used to happen normally, but because of the virus situation, obviously they have stopped these draws, and the last draw that we had for FSW was in March. But otherwise the draws happen every 2 weeks. So it starts with you getting an invitation to apply ITA in that draw. Now before you get an ITA, first you need to be part of the CRS pool, And how do you become a part of that pool? You become a part of that pool by submitting your express entry profile. So the thing with your express entry profile is that it requires you to enter all the information about yourself, like in terms of your experience, your education and stuff like that. But they require two things. Mandatorily. One is your scores for IELTS or CELPIP, or if you want to submit French scores, then TEF and TCF are the two exams that they accept. So you can basically, they need your language assessment scores. Then they also need your educational credential assessment, ECA. So these two things are required for you to be able to create your express entry profile and stay in the CRS pool. Once the draw is out, and if your CRS score is above the cutoff of that draw, the CRS cutoff, then you get an ITA. Once you get an ITA, they give you 60 days time to submit your entire PR application. So that's how it goes. Now, while submitting the application, you will need not just your ECA report and your IELTS or your some like CELPIP or TEF scores. You will also require a lot of other things. So, for instance, you will require an experience letter, which is very detailed. It's not the typical experience letter, that we get from companies when we leave. When we leave, it's like this experience letter. They call it as a reference letter, and that is much more detailed. So the letter needs to specify your job roles. During your tenure with the company, if you had promotions or change in job titles, those need to be mentioned. If there were changes to your salary, those need to be mentioned in that. Then the fact that that job was a full-time job also needs to be mentioned. So it should be it should carry the word full-time, or it should kind of tell you how many days a week and how many hours each day you work. So that way it becomes full-time. And for the purpose of counting, having your experience counted as a full-time experience, the definition is that it should be 30 hours or more each week. So that should also be mentioned in your reference letter. So either the word full-time, or the hours, basically, and those hours should be more than 30. The reference letter should also mention all of your duties that you did, okay, all the job duties. So this is not like the typical experience letter that you get when you leave the company, right? So it's much more in detail. So normally you have to go back to your employer and tell them, hey, what, I'm trying for my immigration to Canada, and this is what is required. So I need these many details in my reference letter. So then they have to kind of custom build that for you and give it to you. A lot of times you face issues with having them cooperate with you. So sometimes instead of a reference letter, you might end up kind of providing a combination of documents. So maybe your offer letter, maybe your salary slips to prove that you were working, you were getting paid, because you just cannot show an employment that is that doesn't pay you. You need to show an employment that is not only full time but that is also paid. So it's only paid employment. So you also need to kind of, sometimes you can kind of like I said, provide a combination of documents. So your offer letter, your salary slips, sometimes even your tax returns, just to bolster your case, and then the typical relieving letter or experience letter. And sometimes you can have your colleagues kind of write something and mention that these were the duties that you performed, and then you can kind of have it notarized, and those things are all there. So it's like your reference letter is required, or a combination of several documents to prove your experience. Then you also need your medicals to be done. So that information is there on the CIC website. So if you just type in Google CIC.gc.ca medical examination Canada PR, and you will actually end up going to a page where they have a list of panel physicians, and those are the only physicians the CIC accepts. So you have to go to those places and get your medicals done. You also need to have your police clearance certificate. So for instance, I was in the US, so I also had to get my police clearance done from the US. In addition to having a PCC from India, I had to get it from the FBI as well. So in the FBI terminology, they call it as identity history summary. So I had to apply for that online, and then they generated that and sent a PDF of that to my email. So I had to get that done as well. So there are a lot of documents, experience, your ECA report, your language proficiency, reports, then your police clearance is there, then you will also be required to show your bank statements, because you have to prove that you have enough funds to survive once you land in Canada, because nobody gets a job right on day one. So you also need that as well. So proof of funds, you need to show, again, your funds should be such that they are not subject to ups and downs. So if you tell them that, okay, I have invested something in the stock market in India, and well, I'm just going to show my stock holdings as my proof of funds. No, because what if the value of that investment goes down to zero, right? So that you have lost that money. So you can't show such things. So the fund should be liquid. They should not be like they should not be encumbered by anything. You see, you heard the word unencumbered. So basically, those funds should not be for any other purpose. They should be for you to use, nobody else. And the CIC, they, if they even catch that, like if they figure out that the funds have been taken as a loan from somebody just so that you can show those funds, they will outright reject your application, because if it's taken as a loan, it's not yours. Eventually you're going to pay somebody else. Then how will you use those funds to live in Canada when you enter Canada? So you need to be careful about showing proof of funds as well. I just checked the CIC website sometime back, and it's like it starts with 12,960 Canadian dollars. So if it's just one person, applying for the PR, then for one person it's 12,960 Canadian dollars. That much, of an amount you need to have with you in your bank account. In not necessarily in bank account, maybe in other forms as well, but those should be funds that are liquid and that can be used, immediately if required. And they should not be subject to any kind of risk, in terms of, like the value of those funds will go down. Nothing like that should be there. So these things are required as well. Besides that, if your specific situation is a little tricky and there are things that you feel that the CIC officer will need an explanation for, or you need to explain about things upfront, you also need to have a letter of explanation ready for certain things. For instance, like I was just mentioning about the reference letter, right? So if you do not get a reference letter which is in the format that the CIC requires, then you submit a combination of documents. So in that combination of documents, you know what you are trying to do, but the CIC officer may not necessarily understand what you are trying to do. So you can use the letter of explanation to help, give them an explanation as to why you are submitting a combination of documents and how it will help, your case. So these things are normally required, when you do the PR process. And then I think, yeah, you will also need to go through biometrics. Again, on their website they kind of list the countries. Of if you are a resident of certain country, you need to go through a biometric, as well. Or sometimes, if you are a resident of some country, they kind of exempt you from that requirement. So that is also there. So you need to have that done as well. Like I said, police clearance, medicals, these are things you can get done even before you get an ITA. So if you think that the draw will be conducted tomorrow and you are very sure that the cutoff will be such that yours is going to be higher than that and you are going to get an ITA for sure, if you are very confident, you can get your medicals and the PCC done upfront. You can have it done, you can have it ready well in advance. But remember, the PCC that you do for a country of residence, so in my case my country of residence was India, because when I was in India I tried for PR. So the PCC validity normally it is 6 months. Now, this is not stated anywhere on the website, but through reading different websites, people's experience, normally the validity of PCC is 6 months for the country of your residence. If the PCC is older than 6 months, the CIC will not accept it. So don't have the PCC done right away if you are going to apply for Canada's 8 months, 9 months down the line. Don't do that right away. So do it around the time you are very confident that you are going to receive an ITA. So around that time you can start initiating a process for getting the PCC done.
So can you please tell for our listeners like the PCC, the term PCC and the term ITA?
So ITA is like invitation to apply. So that's what basically means that okay, the Canadian government they find you they just find that okay, your CRS score is more than their cutoff score. So it's like they are giving an invitation to apply for the PR. So that's what it means. And PCC is, like I mentioned, police clearance certificate, right?
Yeah.
So yeah. What else is required? Let me just think of that. I think by and large these are the things that are required. But anything more than that is like, it's all available on their website. So whenever you make a Google search, just make sure to type canada.ca or cic.gc.ca, and then you put your search term. Because if you just put your search term PCC for Canada PR, you will be directed to some other website which may not be a source of credible information. So the Canadian government website is a source of credible information, and what they say is final, right? So whenever you do a Google search, you just type canada.ca or you type cic.gc.ca and then comma, and then you search for that term. So the first search result will be of a website which is specifically Canadian website, right? Canadian government's website, and that's the best source of information. So all of these things normally you will find on the website, and the process is manageable on your own. You don't necessarily need to go for a consultant, and if you decide to go for a consultant, make sure that you ask them if they are registered with the ICCRC. Okay, so there is this a regulatory body that goes by the name ICCRC, and do not confuse ICCRC with IRCC. IRCC is CIC. The other name of CIC is IRCC. IRCC and CIC is basically a government department based out of Ottawa, whereas ICCRC is a regulatory body and they regulate all these immigration consultants. In India, we have a lot of immigration consultants. They are basically just scammers. They take your money and they do nothing. And if they are not registered with the ICCRC, you cannot take action against them. But imagine if they are registered with the ICCRC and then they do not provide you services. If you complain to the ICCRC, they can go behind the consultant. Okay. So you always make sure that your consultant is licensed. Ask them for their ICCRC registration number. If they refuse to give that to you, then something is fishy. Stay away. If they give it to you, you have the option of putting that number in the ICCRC website and checking if that number belongs to that consultant. If yes, fine. If no, then there is a problem. Again, if yes, fine. Well, that does not guarantee that they will give you good services. Just because they are licensed, they might still, like give you bad services. But at least you know that if they are licensed and if they give you bad services, you can go after them by complaining to the ICCRC.
Okay. Yeah.
Make sense?
Yes, definitely.
Thank you, Nilay. It was such a precise and very detailed information.
Just wanted to request you to just name the documents according to the priority, if you can. Just the name of the document.
Yeah. Yeah, so the thing is, because you want to first be part of the CRS pool, you need to create an express entry profile, and at that point of time, you compulsorily need your, language proficiency results. So, like I said, for English it is ILTS or CELPIP. For French it is TEF, TCF. So, these you need. And you also need your educational credential assessment, ECA report. So these two are definitely required right at the time you make your express entry profile. Then you will require your police clearance certificate, PCC. You will require your reference letters, the detailed experience letters. Yeah. You will require medicals to be done. You will also require biometrics. Now biometrics is not a document, but you will need that to be done. You will require letter of explanation if there is something you specifically want to explain to the CIC officer before they start questioning you or before they just reject your application. Then you will also require a proof of funds. So your bank statements. Sometimes besides your bank statements, if you have invested in fixed deposits, like you can definitely submit that as well, because FDs, they are not subject to, the value of your FD is not subject to changes. It doesn't change with ups and downs in the market, right? Yeah. So you can show FD as well. So these things, sometimes you do a gift deed because somebody in your family is gifting you that money and they are saying that, hey, you can use it for your purpose, I'm gifting it to you. So you can even show gift deed for your proof of fund. So normally these documents you will require. So mostly you will require these documents.
Like just for the info, like if any person by mistake forgets to upload some document, so do IRCC messages you, or like how it works?
So what happens is when you put your information in the profile, okay, they generate a document checklist for you, so you will not miss out on anything. You will have everything. And yes, one more thing that I just recall is, they will also ask you to submit your photographs in a certain specification. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that earlier. So they will give you a document checklist, so there will be a placeholder for each document, and you need to upload as per that. If that doesn't happen, you can't proceed. And secondly, sometimes you might upload something, but that was not sufficient. Maybe something else was supposed to go along with it. So the thing is, do not wait for them, because if look, they are human beings, and not every CIC officer will be good enough to get back to you and tell you that, hey, this is missing, please submit. There are CIC officers who are very strict about this. They will outright reject your complete application. Finished. So if you ever realize after uploading things and you proceeded, you submitted the application, and you realize, hey, there is something I missed out, don't wait for them to get back. You can raise a web form. Through the web form, you can upload stuff. You can tell them, sorry, this was what was supposed to be uploaded along with that, and let me provide you right away. So don't wait for them. Never ever do that, because not every CIC officer will be good enough to have a message come to you that, hey, this is missing. Sometimes they'll just reject your application.
Okay. So I think they should maintain their checklist and then check all the documents.
Absolutely. And look, things like IELTS or ECA report or police clearance, these are all common things everybody requires. So these are things that you can have ready. Your reference letters. If you're a primary applicant, you need a reference letter, because you can get you get points for that. If you're a secondary applicant, your work experience doesn't matter. So unless until your work experience is in Canada. So if my wife is a secondary applicant and she doesn't have Canadian experience, then I don't need to tell her to get reference letters from her Indian employers, because anyway, being a secondary, her non-Canadian experience is anyway not going to be counted.
Okay.
So like, how did you prepare for IELTS? Like you talked about IELTS, and in your case, like you talked about the primary and secondary candidates. So were you like, have you planned this with your family, and like who was the primary and secondary? If so?
Yeah. So it was me and my wife. So I and my wife, right? So what we did is, on the internet, again, do one thing: just type Canada.ca and comma and CRS tool. Okay. So the CRS tool helps you to play around with different situations. So maybe you put yourself as the primary applicant and your spouse as the secondary, or your spouse as the primary and yourself as the secondary, and you can put hypothetical IELTS scores, hypothetical scores for your ECA, and then you can kind of see which one gives you the best CRS, and then you can plan accordingly as to who will be the primary applicant and who should be the secondary. So in our case, it was like, because I had US Masters and I knew that I would score more for the education points, I thought that it's better that I be a primary. If you look at both of our experiences, we have an equal number of year of experience, so the points would be same in that case, right? So again, talking about IELTS scores, both of us have a pretty good command over English, and we can like score well. And I scored band 8, and my wife also scored something closer to that. So the thing is, that way also we knew that we would more or less be equal. So then what was the differentiating factor? The differentiating factor between us was that I had master's education, and I knew that that would get me more points for education in the CRS scoring. So then we decided that I will be the primary. In terms of preparing for the IELTS, to be very honest, both of us like just prepared for 3 or 4 days, because like the advantage we always had was right since our childhood we had been to school wherein the medium of instruction was English, and so it's like you kind of get used to it, right? Over a period of time. You have been talking in English since years. Okay, your mother tongue is something different what you talk at home, but otherwise you have been exposed to that language since years, right? So for us it was like not a big deal, just 3 or 4 days of preparation, and we were able to get good scores in that. So honestly, if you ask me how I prepared for English, for IELTS, of course, when you make a payment, they kind of send you a book, and I just referred that. And again, I mean, I did not refer the entire book. I don't even know half of the contents of that even now. But yeah, I kind of just referred, I just took an overview of what's there and just got some idea of what's there, and then I just went and did so. But yeah, it worked out well for me. But if you're not very comfortable, then I have heard on the internet, that people follow YouTube videos of IELTS JAY, IELTS LIZ Liz. These are quite popular among people for IELTS kind of guidance. Yeah.
Okay. So when you checked on your CRS points, so what were your points at that time, and what was the cutoff at that time? So if you
Yeah.
were below your
So
cutoff, how did you improve your CRS points?
well, I mean, the thing is, when we got our ITA in that draw, the cutoff was 449, and our CRS score was 461. So we were anyway 12 points above the cutoff. So obviously we got an ITA within 24 hours of the draw taking place. Um, uh, the two things that helped our CRS scores were my IELTS scores and my education points, because my education got a master's equivalency when we sent it to WES. Okay, so that's the thing, that these are the two things that help us.
Okay.
And remember one thing: if you are a primary applicant, okay, your IELTS score has a lot of weightage. If you are a secondary applicant, you improve your IELTS score by 0.5, it will just improve your score by a few points, your CRS score. But if you are a primary applicant and your score improves by 0.5, there will be a big hike in your CRS score. So the primary should always focus more on IELTS, because a 0.5 increase can give you a bigger score, much bigger. That's the thing. And again, for ECA, if you want to get the best possible points, you have to be very careful with which agency you get your ECA done from. So in case of Canada, we have WS, we have CES, we have ICES, we have ICAS, we have IQAS. These five agencies, plus we have PEBC and MCC. So all of these short forms that I have mentioned, if you just kind of Google these, you will get all the full form, and these are the 7 agencies from which the Canadian government accepts the credential evaluation reports, okay, for your PR purpose, not from any other agencies. So you have to be careful as to which agency you choose. PEBC and MCC is there for pharmacists and medical professionals, but WS, CES, ICES, ICAS, IQAS, these are for all other professionals. And between these agencies, you have to be careful, because these agencies use different criteria to do your evaluation. So the same educational credential you send to WS, they might not give you a master's equivalency for that, but you send it to IQAS, they might give it to you. And historically, IQAS, when we read so many Facebook posts, or when we talk to people, I realize that they kind of are lenient at giving you your equivalency. So with them, you have a better chance of having your masters being considered as a masters. WS, lot of times, even if you have a masters, they just kind of give you a bachelor's equivalency, which means less points for education. So you have to be careful. Now, something like a chartered accountant or a cost accountant or a company secretary from India, okay, the only agency that evaluates these qualifications is WS. So if you are a CA, CS, or and if you want to send your documents to CES or to ICES, ICAS, IQS, they will outright reject. They will say that we don't even recognize these credentials.
Okay.
But WS will, evaluate it. So you have to be very careful with which agency you send your documents to, because that can have an impact on your CRS scores.
Okay.
So, like as you mentioned about the ECA, so what was your ECA time and the overall processing time?
So WS, we just sent to WS, and in my case, since mine was US Masters, even though I finished in 1 year, the thing with WS is that if it's a US Masters and if it is accredited, they give you a Masters equivalency, and then you are not required to send your Indian education to them, because Masters is Masters. You don't need if you get points for Masters, then nothing like it. Of course, PhD has a higher point, but we are not talking about PhD. So in my case, I just sent my masters, and it kind of took them about 30-35 days to give me my report, and they took a similar period of time for my wife as well. So roughly about 30-35 days, we got our ECA report. Yeah.
Okay.
If you have a degree from Sikkim Manipal University, the only agency that will evaluate that is ICAS. Do not send it to WS. Do not send it to any other agency. They do not recognize that. If you have a degree from Symbiosis Center for Distance Learning, only IQAS, no other agency.
So next thing we want to ask is about the funds.
Yeah.
So what is the best way to show the funds, as you have already mentioned about it, and like for how many months we should have it in our accounts, and what's the best way to do
So, when you ask what's the best, you have to think of what's the best from the CIC officer's point of view. Okay, because if they are unable to understand, look, they are Canadians. They may not understand each and every country's terminology. So in India we have savings account, we have fixed deposits. Okay, fine. Those terminologies are kind of here as well, so it's fine. But if there is something new and that that is a liquid fund and that is not going to decrease in its value, not necessarily that the CIC officer also knows about it. Okay? So if you want to like think of what's the best way of showing funds, think from their point of view. Make things uncomplicated for them. Make it easier for them to understand, because if they do not understand, if they get confused, then they will start doubting what you have shown them for funds, and that's where they might end up rejecting your application. You never know. So if anybody were to ask me what's the best way of showing funds, and this is my personal take, people may or may not agree, but my personal take is that show it as pure savings balance. And it's not necessary to have those funds in your accounts like 6 or 7 months prior to getting an ITA. Sometimes you first get an ITA and then you kind of collect your funds, and then you show that then you get a letter from the bank that I have so much of funds in my account, and then you submit your PR application. So it's not that you need to necessarily have funds ready 6 months, 8 months beforehand. Nothing like that. People say that that's a safer way of doing it, but even if you do it around, even if you gather funds around the time you get your ITA, that's fine. In my case, I got ITA and after that I arranged for funds. But whatever funds I arranged for, those were like by breaking our FD, or by breaking our investments in mutual funds or something, and then just pulling everything into one savings account and making it less complicated, uncomplicated for them to understand. And that's how we just did it. I did have like 1 or 2 FDs which I kind of submitted, but without that also I was fulfilling the criteria for the minimum funds requirement that they have set. So for me it was simple, and I would always say just do a simple savings account, because they understand that very well, and it makes their life easier. And if it's easier for them to understand, then it's easier for them to give a favorable decision on your PR file.
Okay, so what's the minimum funds?
So the minimum is like I mentioned, if it's one person, it's $12,960 Canadian dollars. Then if it's two people, it's like 16,135 Canadian dollars. If it's 3 people, it is like more than 19,000 Canadian dollars, and it keeps going up. Again, it's difficult to remember all those amounts, but if you just Google Canada.ca, and comma and just express entry proof of funds, you will be directed. The search result will show you the website of the Canadian government itself, and it will show you the amounts for fund requirements depending on the number of people who are going to be part of the PR application.
And does it increase the chances if you are showing more than the minimum, the funds?
I mean, there is no nothing, no statistic to kind of show that showing more than the minimum increases the chances. But there is this feeling that if you show more, it does increase the chances. I mean, it's just something that people talk about, but there is nothing concrete to support that thing. Definitely, if you are showing less than that, you are going to be rejected. But showing the same amount or more, but what? It's always better to show a little more, because the thing is, if you are not a Canadian, okay, and your funds are in Indian rupees, and right now using the exchange rate that is prevailing, it might be exactly like $13,000. Let's say one person is applying and they need $12,960. So let's say 13,000 Canadian dollar. You have your money which is denominated in Indian rupees INR. Based on the exchange rate, when it is converted, when your bank gives you that letter, it says it's $13,000. Now the thing is, $13,000 is how many dollars above the 12,960 minimum? Just $40 above, right? What happens if the exchange rate moves adversely, and your INR is no longer worth 13,000 Canadian dollars? Maybe now it's, by the time the CIC officer looks at your file, the exchange rate has moved adversely, and when they calculate at their end, they are like, hey, you know what, this INR is just $12,000. It doesn't touch 12,960, and then you will be in trouble. So it's always better to have more funds than they have asked for, because that is like a cushion that will save you if the exchange rates move against you, right?
Yes. So it's like for 6 months you should maintain the funds. Like,
not necessary. You can gather the funds the day you get your ITA. It's okay, but make sure that the funds are such that they are well above the minimum, because if the exchange rate goes against you, you still have a buffer. Maybe in Canadian dollars the funds fall. The value of the funds fall when the CIC officer converts it from your INR bank statement to Canadian dollars. But even if it falls, it might still be above the threshold that the minimum that they are asking for. So you might collect the funds recently, but make sure that the amount is good enough, like it is much above their minimum. Just just because they told you $12,960, I will show $13,000. Don't do that. You rather show $14,000.
and it should be the liquid money as
Yes,
already.
exactly. So your INR fund should be such that at any point of time, when they are converted, they should be $14,000, $13,500, but they should be comfortably above your 12,960, requirement. And I'm talking about PR for one person, because 12,960 is for one person.
Okay.
So this was about the PR. So when a person gets PR, so the things that a person needs to know about, like, did you took any professional license in Canada or after coming
Not
here?
yet. Not yet. And thankfully, without getting any professional license, I still got a job, a part-time job in my own field. I did not even have to compromise on that. So a part-time job in my own field right in the month of November. I landed on October 24th, and November 4th, I started that job. So 10 days. So. And I did that part-time job, till the end of November, and December I started a full-time one. So I was not required to take any, licensing or anything. And same was the case with my wife as well. So thankfully, like, both of us were immediately employed.
That's good.
So
Yeah.
how much time it took for you to land your first job from India? Like, did you start applying from India itself?
Yeah. I started applying from India itself, and I took a virtual Canadian number, put it on my resume to make it look as if it's Canadian, and then
That's
I would get calls at 3 a.m. in the morning Indian time, because when it's early hours in India, it's proper working time here in Canada, so they don't know. I mean, when they look at their my resume, oh yeah, it's a Canadian number. They just pick up and call, and I'm just fast asleep, and I'm like, so that happened, and I had 7 interview calls like that. The problem is, all of those interviews went well. The only thing was, at the end of the call, they would ask, so are you available for an in-person interview? And I am like, well, you know what, I am landing in 2 weeks. If you can wait for 2 weeks, you will see me right there. And they are like, no, what, we want to close the position next week. I'm sorry, we can't proceed with that.
Okay.
But the thing is, they ask for, are you available for an in-person? It means that, they have been talking to you and they found you to be
Yep.
good enough for that. Just that you couldn't make it eventually.
That's true.
Yeah.
How did the interview process go overall for you?
So normally, the process was pretty straightforward. They would just kind of ask, why you are interested in this role, why you are interested in our company, what is it about our company that kind of, makes you apply for jobs with us, how your experience can help in this role. Back in India, if you apply for jobs, they get very technical with, what you have studied. So if I'm an accountant, they will start asking me the debits and credits and things like that. And they will focus on the technical stuff. But here in Canada, employers focus more on what skills you bring. You may not be technically very sound, but if you have the right attitude, if you're able to communicate well, and if they think that with some training you will be, you will be on track. They are very open minded and they will give you that opportunity. So that way the interviews were very straightforward.
Also, like, did you join any bridging programs, and if yes, no? Okay.
I mean, well, we were not even in look, honestly, you will think of joining a bridging program if you land here, try to get a job, you don't get any, and then you realize that what, my experience is foreign to these people, and they are not considering it, and therefore I need to bridge that gap between my home country experience, so that it kind of gives me a better footing here. But in our case we were kind of employed pretty much as we landed, so it was like, well, we don't need that.
That's true.
But according to you, what for people, if they do not get a job, like you were lucky in your
Yeah.
but like, should they join any bridging programs? Are these helpful?
Yeah. When I talk to my friends about these programs, that I know people, they have done these bridging programs, and they do mention that in their case it did help them. So it kind of helped them have their foot in the industry. At least be absorbed by the job market. So sometimes people don't even get that. They keep trying and trying, and they are not able to make it to any interview either. So definitely these programs do help. If you're struggling, go for these programs. They will definitely help.
Okay. So, just for our listeners, like, can you tell us what preparations you did for your first month to land, when you land here, and anything in your mind?
Oh, well, the biggest thing is you need a place to live, right? I mean, so, well, in my case, I had a family from our community. They were already here, so we were thankfully, we were able to live with them in our first 1 or 2 months we were there. So we did not have much to prepare in terms of where we would be living. We knew where we would be living. And then the only preparation we did was kind of money wise, because obviously, when we researched, we got to know that Canada is expensive. Greater Toronto area, if you want to be there, definitely it's expensive to live. And then our research at that time also showed that it's not that easy to get jobs. And I still hold that view that it's difficult to get jobs.
Yep.
I got a job immediately, okay, good. But if you look at the overall picture, the market is very saturated. Okay, so it's like back then we wanted to make sure that okay, let's be prepared with funds that will help us to survive for the first 6 months, assuming that we will not get jobs for the first 6 months. So that was the biggest preparation we had to do. In terms of being mentally prepared to stay away from the family, definitely if you are leaving your home country for the first time, you need to be prepared for that as well. In our case, we did not have to prepare because we had already lived in the US before, so we had lived away from the family, so we know how it feels. And this time we were much more prepared to kind of stay away. We do miss them, but it's like you are prepared for something like this because you have done something like this before. But definitely, if you're a first timer, you need to be mentally prepared because here you will feel homesick. If you don't try to make friends and you just don't try to keep yourself busy, then you will just start thinking about people back home and your friends back home and everything. So you really need to be mentally prepared. In our case, it was okay, but for others, I would say definitely financially you need to be prepared. Mentally, you need to be prepared. We mainly did prepared ourselves financially because we thought that let's assume the worst case scenario, what if we don't get a job for next 6 months. So that was the thing. So that was the biggest preparation. Like I said, housing was not a problem for us. We had somebody here, we lived with them.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. That's from my side, I guess. Thank you so much, Nilay, for it was such a good interview and discussion, I would probably say. So it was a very detailed discussion.
Well, I'm glad I was able to share that, and I'm glad that I got this opportunity to interact with you that way. I like to share things that I know.
Nice to meet you. Thank you so much.
Have a great day. Bye bye.
Sure. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.